The ice crystals formed patterns on Kira's breath as she pulled her daughter closer, feeling the tiny body shivering against her chest. 3-year-old Maya had stopped crying hours ago, which terrified Kira more than the screaming had. The silence meant her child was giving up, surrendering to the cold that had claimed so many others in the colony. The emergency shelter's heating system had failed 16 hours ago. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen wasteland of Kepler 442b, a planet that had once seemed like humanity's second chance. Now it felt like their grave. The temperature readings on her wrist display showed -47 degrees Celsius and dropping. Even with the insulated walls of the shelter, death crept closer with each passing hour. Kira remembered when they first arrived on this world 2 years ago. The colonization ship New Dawn had carried 15,000 souls across the void, seeking a fresh start after Earth's climate had finally collapsed beyond repair. Kepler 442b had seemed perfect in the initial surveys, slightly larger than Earth, with a stable star and promising atmospheric readings. The first settlements had thrived during the planet's warmer season, but they hadn't understood the planet's true nature. They hadn't realized that Kepler 442b's orbit was more elliptical than their models suggested, creating extreme seasonal variations that lasted decades. What they thought was the normal climate was actually the planetary summer. Winter had come 6 months ago, and with it, temperatures that no human settlement could withstand. The main colony had fallen first. Kira had watched the communication feeds go dark one by one as power systems failed, and people froze in their homes. The outlying settlements tried to hold on, consolidating survivors into central heated areas, but the cold was relentless. It seemed to seep through every barrier humanity could construct. Maya stirred weakly in her arms, and Kira felt tears freeze on her cheeks. She had tried everything, burning furniture for warmth, layering every piece of clothing they owned, even sharing body heat with the other survivors. But one by one, they had succumbed. The Hendersons died 3 days ago. Old Mr. Chun passed yesterday. This morning, she had found Mrs. Albright frozen solid in her bunk. Now it was just Kira and Maya in the shelter that had once housed 20 families. She looked at her daughter's pale face, the lips tinged with blue despite the layers of blankets wrapped around her small form. Maya's breathing was shallow and irregular. Kira knew the signs. She had seen them in the others before they died. Hypothermia was claiming her baby, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The rational part of her mind told her to accept it, to make peace with their fate. The heating fuel had run out completely. The emergency beacon had been transmitting for days with no response. Even if rescue came, it would be too late. They had perhaps hours left before the cold claimed them both. But she couldn't give up, not while Maya still breathed, not while there was even the smallest chance. Kira stood on unsteady legs, her muscles stiff from the cold, and carried Maya to the shelter's small window. Outside, the alien landscape stretched endlessly, rolling hills of ice and snow under a pale, distant sun that provided no warmth. The sky was a deep purple-black, and strange aurora danced overhead, beautiful and terrible. This world had killed them. Humanity had reached across the stars only to die slowly in the cold. She pressed her face against the frosted glass, searching for any sign of hope. Movement, light, anything that might suggest rescue was coming. But there was only the endless white expanse and the howling wind. A memory surfaced from her childhood on Earth. Her grandmother telling her stories of the old frontier when humans first crossed oceans and continents to find new lands. How many had died in those journeys? How many had frozen in mountain passes or starved in empty plains? Yet humanity had persisted, driven by something deeper than logic or comfort. The same spirit that had brought them to the stars would not let her give up now. Kira returned to their makeshift bed, mattresses, and blankets piled together for maximum insulation. She lay down with Maya cradled against her, sharing what little body heat remained between them. The shelter groaned around them as the wind battered its walls, but it held. Human engineering, even when failing, was stubborn. She began to sing softly to Maya, an old lullaby her own mother had sung to her. Her voice was hoarse from the cold, but the words still came. Maya's eyes fluttered open, such beautiful brown eyes, like her father's. Thomas had died in the first wave of the freeze, trying to repair the colony's main generator. He had always been the brave one, the one who believed humanity could overcome any obstacle. "Daddy's watching over us," Kira whispered to Maya. "He's going to keep us safe." Maya's small hand emerged from the blankets and touched Kira's face. Her fingers were ice cold, but her grip was firm. She was fighting too, in her own small way. The hours passed slowly. Kira dozed fitfully, waking periodically to check on Maya's breathing. Each time, she feared she would find her daughter still and cold, but Maya's heart kept beating. Weak but persistent like humanity itself. She remembered reading about the first Mars colonies, how they had faced similar challenges. Equipment failures, environmental hazards, the constant threat of death in an alien world. Many had died, but enough had survived to establish humanity's first foothold beyond Earth. Those colonists had become legends, their names remembered centuries later. Perhaps that was humanity's true strength. Not the ability to avoid death, but the refusal to surrender to it. Even when hope seemed impossible, humans found ways to endure. The wind outside grew stronger, shaking the shelter's framework. Kira pulled the blankets tighter around them both, creating a small cocoon of shared warmth. This might be their last night, but they would face it together. If they died, it would be with dignity, holding on to love even in the face of an indifferent universe. She thought about the messages they had sent to Earth before the communication array failed. Reports of their situation, requests for help that would take years to reach home, and years more for any response to return. The people of Earth might never know what had happened to the New Dawn colony, but they had tried. They had pushed the boundaries of human knowledge and capability, even if they had failed. That had to count for something. Maya's breathing grew shallower. Kira held her closer, feeling her daughter's heart beating against her chest. Such a small, brave heart. Maya had never complained about the cold, never cried for things she couldn't have. She seemed to understand, in the way children sometimes do, that they were facing something beyond anyone's control. "I love you, baby girl," Kira whispered. "Mommy loves you so much." The shelter's lights flickered as the emergency power finally began to fail. Soon they would be in complete darkness, with only the alien aurora outside to light their final hours. But Kira was not afraid. She had done everything she could. She had protected her daughter as long as possible, loved her until the very end. That was what mothers did. That was what humans did. As consciousness began to slip away, Kira thought she heard something, a sound different from the wind. Deeper, more rhythmic. Like engines. But that was impossible. No rescue was coming. Her mind was playing tricks as the hypothermia advanced. She closed her eyes and held Maya close, feeling her daughter's warmth against her heart. If this was the end, at least they would face it together. At least Maya would not die alone. The sound grew louder, but Kira was already drifting away. The cold was winning, but it had not defeated them. Even in death, they would remain unbroken. That was the human way. Outside, something moved in the darkness. Lights appeared in the sky. Not the natural aurora, but something else. Something purposeful. The sound of engines became unmistakable, growing closer with each passing moment. But Kira could not hear it anymore. She had slipped into the final sleep, her arms still wrapped protectively around her daughter. They lay together in the dying shelter, two small figures against the vast cold of an alien world. The lights in the sky grew brighter, descending through the storm toward the surface. Whatever was coming, it would arrive soon. But for Kira and Maya, time had run out. The cold had claimed them, as it had claimed so many others. Or so it seemed. Deep in her unconscious state, Kira still fought. Her mother's heart refused to stop beating, refused to let go of the child in her arms. Even as her body temperature dropped to dangerous levels, some primitive part of her mind held on. Humans were stubborn creatures, capable of surviving in conditions that should have killed them. The lights grew closer, and with them came hope. But hope was a dangerous thing on a world like this. It could keep you alive long enough to suffer more, or it could be the spark that ignited impossible survival. In the darkness of the shelter, two hearts continued to beat. Faint, irregular, but persistent. The human spirit, refusing to surrender even when logic demanded it. The storm began to clear as the lights descended, revealing shapes in the sky that defied easy explanation. They were not human ships. The design was too strange, the technology too advanced. But they were clearly artificial, clearly controlled by intelligence. The question was, whose intelligence? And what did they want with the dying remnants of humanity's first interstellar colony? Kira would not learn the answer for some time. She floated in a place between life and death, holding her daughter in arms that had grown too weak to feel. But even in that liminal state, she remained a mother. She remained human, and that perhaps was about to make all the difference. The lights touched down nearby, sending vibrations through the frozen ground. The shelter shook slightly, disturbed by forces beyond the wind. Whatever had arrived was large, powerful, and very close. In the silence that followed, broken only by the whisper of alien wind across ice, change came to Kepler 442b. The long night of human suffering was about to give way to something new, something that would test the very definitions of strength, compassion, and what it meant to be human in a universe full of wonders and terrors. But for now, Kira and Maya slept the sleep of the nearly dead, unaware that their story was just beginning warmth. It was the first sensation that penetrated Kira's consciousness, not the burning pain she expected from frostbite, but gentle, enveloping warmth that seemed to flow through her body like liquid sunlight. Her first coherent thought was of Maya, and she tried to move her arms to check on her daughter, but her limbs felt heavy and unresponsive. Easy. The voice was deep, calm, and definitely not human. The words were spoken in perfect English, but there was something in the tone, a resonance that suggested a larger chest cavity, perhaps different vocal cords altogether. You are safe. Your offspring is safe. Kira's eyes snapped open, her mother's instincts overriding her body's weakness. She found herself lying on something soft and warm, surrounded by a soft blue glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The space around her was curved and organic-looking, more grown than built, with surfaces that pulsed gently like living tissue. A figure moved into her field of vision, and Kira's breath caught in her throat. It was tall, at least 8 feet, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Its features were humanoid, but elongated, with large, intelligent eyes that held depths of wisdom and compassion. It wore no clothing that she could see, but its skin seemed to shift and flow in patterns that might have been decoration or might have been natural. "Where is Maya?" Kira's voice came out as a croak, but she managed to sit up despite the weakness in her limbs. "Your offspring rests nearby," the being said, gesturing with a long, graceful arm toward another glowing area. "She was closer to death than you, but her small heart proved remarkably strong. Human children are resilient." Kira looked where the being indicated and saw Maya lying on a similar surface, surrounded by the same blue glow. Her daughter's color had returned to normal, and her breathing was deep and regular. She appeared to be in natural sleep, rather than the unconscious state of hypothermia. "Who are you?" Kira asked, though part of her didn't care about the answer as long as Maya was alive. "What are you?" "I am Jorik of the Kethvar," the being replied, settling into what might have been a chair that seemed to flow up from the floor to accommodate his frame. "We are travelers, like yourselves, though we have been journeying among the stars for far longer than your species has existed." The name meant nothing to Kira, but the implications were staggering. First contact with an alien species, and It had come not as the triumphant moment humanity had always imagined, but as a rescue from the consequences of their own hubris. "How long have we been here?" she asked, trying to organize her thoughts. The last thing she remembered was lying in the failing shelter, holding Maya as the cold claimed them both. "2 of your planetary rotations," Jorik replied. "Your body temperature had dropped to levels that should have been fatal for your species. Your offspring was even closer to death. But your metabolisms responded well to our thermal restoration chambers. 2 days. They had been unconscious for 2 days while these aliens, the Kethvar, had saved their lives. The others," Kira said suddenly, remembering the colony. "There were others in the settlements." "Are they?" Jorik's expression, alien though it was, clearly conveyed sadness. "We arrived too late for most. Your species' thermal regulation is not well suited to this world's climate extremes. We found perhaps 3 dozen survivors across all the settlements, most in conditions similar to yours. 3 dozen out of 15,000. The magnitude of the disaster hit Kira like a physical blow. An entire colony, humanity's first attempt at interstellar expansion, reduced to a few dozen survivors. All those dreams, all those hopes, frozen to death in the alien cold. But you saved who you could," she said, trying to find some positive meaning in the tragedy. "We tried," Jorik agreed. "Though I must confess, we were not prepared for what we found. Your species' determination to survive in impossible conditions is remarkable. Most sentient races would have perished much sooner in such circumstances." There was something in his tone that suggested both admiration and puzzlement. "You sound surprised that we survived as long as we did." "Surprised, yes, but also impressed. The Kethvar have encountered many species in our travels. Most are either highly advanced, with technology that protects them from such dangers, or they are careful to avoid situations beyond their capabilities. Your people seem to possess a third option, the ability to endure far beyond what logic would suggest possible." Kira managed a weak smile. "Humans are stubborn. Is that what you call it?" Jorik seemed to consider this. "We have a concept in our language that roughly translates to the fire that burns in defiance of darkness. Perhaps this is what humans possess." Maya stirred in her resting place, and Kira's attention immediately shifted to her daughter. "Can I go to her?" "Of course." Jorik gestured, and the surface Kira was lying on seemed to flow and reshape itself, becoming a path that led to Maya's location. The technology was so advanced it seemed like magic, but Kira was too focused on her daughter to marvel at it. Maya's eyes opened as Kira approached, and the little girl's face lit up with a smile that nearly broke her mother's heart. "Mommy, you're all better." "I'm better, baby girl," Kira said, scooping Maya into her arms and marveling at how warm and healthy her daughter felt. "How are you feeling?" "I'm warm," Maya said with the simple happiness of a child. "And I saw pretty colors in my dreams. And there's a nice blue man who talks funny, but he's very kind." Kira looked up at Jorik, who was watching the reunion with what she was learning to recognize as his version of a smile. She was not afraid when she awakened. He explained. "Human children seem to adapt to new circumstances with remarkable ease." "Thank you," Kira said, and the words felt inadequate for what this being had done. "You saved our lives." "It was no burden," Jorik replied, "though it has raised many questions about your species that we had not considered before." Before Kira could ask what he meant, another Kethvar entered the chamber. This one was slightly smaller than Jorik, with darker blue skin and more pronounced ridges along what might have been cheekbones. "Jorik," the newcomer said in the same resonant voice, "the council wishes to speak with you about the humans." Something in the newcomer's tone made Kira uneasy. "What kind of questions?" she asked. Jorik exchanged what seemed like a meaningful look with his companion before answering. "The Kethvar have certain protocols regarding primitive species. When we encounter a civilization that has not yet mastered interstellar travel safely, we typically observe from a distance, but do not interfere." The implication sent a chill through Kira that had nothing to do with cold. "But you saved us." "Yes." which has created a situation our leadership must address. Jorik's tone remained calm, but there was an undercurrent of concern. Some believe we have violated our own laws by intervening. The newcomer spoke again. The debate has been intense. Some argue that your species is too primitive to survive in the galaxy, and that our interference was misguided charity. Others contend that your survival instincts demonstrate a potential that should be nurtured. Kira felt Maya tighten her grip, and she realized her daughter was picking up on the tension in the room despite not understanding the words. What does that mean for us? For the other survivors? That remains to be determined, Jorik said carefully. The council will decide whether to return you to your homeworld, relocate you to a more suitable planet, or, he paused, or what? Or allow you to remain and learn to see if humans can truly adapt to life among the stars. The weight of the decision hit Kira immediately. These beings, advanced and powerful enough to travel between stars, were debating humanity's future as a spacefaring species based on what they had observed of a single failed colony. "Can I speak to this council?" she asked. Both Kethvar seemed surprised by the request. The newcomer made a sound that might have been laughter. "You wish to address the Council of Kethvar? No primitive species has ever." "With respect," Kira interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "We're not a primitive species. We're a young species. There's a difference." Jorik tilted his head, and what she was learning was his gesture of curiosity. "Explain this distinction." Kira thought carefully, knowing that her words might determine not just her own fate, but the fate of all humanity. Primitive implies incapable of growth, stuck in basic patterns of behavior. Young means inexperienced, but with the potential to learn and adapt. Humans have been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. We're making mistakes because we're learning, not because we can't learn. An interesting perspective, the newcomer said. But your colony failed completely. Your technology proved inadequate. Your planning was insufficient. These suggest fundamental limitations. "No," Kira said firmly, and Maya looked up at her with wide eyes, sensing her mother's determination. "They suggest inexperience. How many colonies have the Kethvar lost in their history? How many times did you fail before you learned to succeed?" The silence that followed was telling. Jorik and his companion exchanged another look, and Kira sensed she had touched on something significant. The early expeditions of the Kethvar were costly, Jorik admitted finally. Many ships were lost. Many colonies failed. But that was eons ago, in the youth of our civilization. Exactly. And humans are in their youth now. The difference is that when your colonies failed, you learned and tried again. Are you going to deny us the same opportunity? The newcomer made another sound, this one more thoughtful. She argues well for a primitive, for a young species. Maya tugged at Kira's arm. "Mommy, what's happening? Are the blue people going to help us?" Kira looked down at her daughter, seeing not just her own child, but the future of humanity in those innocent eyes. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. But Mommy's going to do everything she can to make sure we're okay." "The council will convene tomorrow," Jorik said after a moment. "I will propose that you be allowed to address them. But I must warn you, many of the counselors are ancient, with perspectives shaped by millions of years of experience. They may not be receptive to arguments from a species they view as barely evolved beyond savagery." "Then I'll have to change their minds," Kira said simply. The newcomer made that sound again. "Jorik, this human displays remarkable confidence for one whose entire colony was just rescued from extinction." "Yes," Jorik agreed, but his tone suggested admiration rather than criticism. "It seems to be a characteristic of the species. Even in the face of impossible odds, they maintain hope and determination." Over the following hours, Kira learned more about the Kethvar and their society. They were an ancient race, having achieved interstellar travel when humanity was still developing agriculture. They had watched countless younger species rise and fall, sometimes helping, sometimes merely observing, always guided by strict principles about interference with developing civilizations. The fact that they had rescued the human survivors was apparently unprecedented in recent history, and had sparked intense debate among their leadership about the future of their relationship with humanity. Most species we encounter either have technology equivalent to our own, or they're so primitive that contact would be harmful to their development. Jork explained as they shared a meal of what he called nutrition synthesis, food that appeared to be created from nothing, but tasted remarkably good. Humans are unusual in that you have achieved interstellar travel, but clearly lack the full understanding necessary for safe colonization. So we're in an awkward middle ground, Kira said. Precisely. Too advanced to ignore, too primitive to treat as equals. Maya, who had been quietly playing with what seemed to be living toys that responded to her touch, looked up. Mama, why do the blue people think we're babies? The innocent question cut to the heart of the matter. Because we're new at this, sweetheart. We haven't been traveling in space as long as they have. But babies grow up, Maya said with the logic of childhood. Don't they know that? Jork stared at the little girl for a long moment, then made a sound Kira was beginning to recognize as laughter. From the mouths of offspring, he said. Perhaps that is the point we have been missing. That night, as Maya slept peacefully in the alien equivalent of a bed, Kira lay awake thinking about what she would say to the council. The fate of humanity's expansion into the galaxy might rest on her ability to convince ancient, powerful beings that her species deserved a chance to grow and learn. She thought about the colonists who had died in the freeze, about their hopes and dreams for a new life among the stars. She thought about Thomas, her husband, who had believed so strongly in humanity's destiny that he had given his life trying to save the colony's power systems. She thought about Maya, who would grow up either as a refugee, dependent on alien charity, or as a member of a species making its way among the stars. The responsibility was crushing, but it was also clarifying. Tomorrow, she would speak not just for herself and Maya, but for all of humanity. She would argue for their right to make mistakes, to learn, to grow. She would make the case that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their knowledge, but their refusal to give up in the face of impossible odds. As she finally drifted off to sleep in the gentle warmth of the HFY ship, Kira dreamed of stars. Not the cold, distant lights she had seen from the dying colony, but warm, welcoming beacons calling humanity forward into their destiny among the cosmos. Tomorrow would determine whether that destiny would be fulfilled or foreclosed. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, both she and Maya slept without fear of the cold. The council chamber was vast beyond imagination, a sphere of crystalline material that seemed to contain entire galaxies within its walls. Kira felt impossibly small as she walked across the transparent floor, aware that beneath her feet lay the swirling depths of space itself. Maya held her hand tightly, her usual fearlessness replaced by wide-eyed wonder at the cosmic grandeur surrounding them. 12 figures sat in a circle around the chamber's center, each elevated on platforms that shifted and moved to keep them equidistant from one another. They were all HFY, but ancient beyond anything Kira had seen before. Their skin had deepened to darker blues and purples, and some bore markings that seemed to move and shift like living tattoos. When they spoke, the chamber itself resonated with their voices. Jork accompanied them, his younger blue seeming almost pale beside these ancient beings. He had spent the morning preparing Kira for what to expect, warning her that some of the council members had observed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. The one called Aeonthal has been alive since her solar system was forming, he had told her quietly. To him, human civilization is barely a moment of existence. Now, standing in the center of the cosmic chamber, Kira felt the weight of those eons pressing down on her. But Maya's small hand in hers reminded her why she was here. This wasn't about impressing ancient beings with human achievements. It was about securing a future for her daughter and all the human children who might come after. The eldest council member, recognizable by the deep purple of his skin and the way the others deferred to him, spoke first. His voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. I am Aeonthal, first speaker of the council. We have convened to discuss the fate of the human survivors and the precedent created by their rescue. His great eyes fixed on Kira with an intensity that made her feel transparent. You requested to address this council. This is unprecedented. No species at your level of development has ever been granted such an audience. Then, perhaps it's time to set a new precedent, Kira replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. With respect, Aeonthal, precedents are made to be broken when circumstances call for it. A ripple of what might have been surprise passed through the council. Another member, her skin a deep indigo marked with silver patterns, leaned forward. You speak boldly for one whose entire species nearly perished from their own inadequacy. The colony ships we found contained the frozen corpses of 15,000 humans who died because they could not adapt to a simple climate variation. The word stung, but Kira had expected this attack. Yes, we failed. Yes, people died because we made mistakes. But that's not the full story, is it? You found survivors. Against all odds, in conditions that should have killed us all, humans endured. We held on long enough for rescue to arrive. Barely, said a third council member, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic disdain. A few dozen survivors out of thousands hardly suggests fitness for galactic citizenship. Maya tugged at Kira's hand and whispered, Mama, why are they being mean? The simple question cut through the grandeur and formality like a blade. Several council members looked at the child with something approaching curiosity, but it was Aeonthal who responded. We're not mean, young human. We are cautious. In our long existence, we have seen many species attempt to expand beyond their capabilities. Most destroy themselves. Some destroy others. We seek to prevent such tragedies. Maya looked up at him with the fearless honesty of a 3-year-old. But we didn't destroy anybody. We just got really cold. Another ripple passed through the council, and Kira realized that Maya's innocent observation had highlighted something important. She's right, Kira said, pressing the advantage. Humanity's first interstellar colony failed, yes. But it failed safely. We didn't devastate the planet. We didn't create weapons of mass destruction. We didn't wage war on each other as we died. We just endured. We held together as families, as communities, right up until the end. The Indigo Council member made a sound of dismissal. Endurance without achievement is merely prolonged suffering. What evidence do you offer that humans can learn from their failures rather than simply repeat them? Kira had prepared for this question. The evidence is standing right here, she said, lifting Maya slightly. Every human child represents our potential to grow beyond our mistakes. Maya will grow up knowing about the colony's failure. She'll learn from it. She'll do better. Assuming she survives to adulthood, another council member interjected. Assuming her species is granted the opportunity to continue developing. The threat was implicit but clear. The council had the power to end humanity's expansion into space before it truly began. They could relocate the survivors to Earth or to some other world where they would be safe but contained, unable to spread their perceived inadequacy to other star systems. You're talking about quarantining an entire species based on one failure, Kira said, allowing anger to creep into her voice. How many chances did the HFY get when they were young? How many worlds did you colonize unsuccessfully before you learned to do it right? Aeonthal's expression didn't change, but when he spoke, there was something new in his voice. The early expansion of the HFY was indeed marked by failures. Many colonies were lost. Many lives were sacrificed to inexperience. But you learned. You grew. You became the great civilization you are today. Kira looked around the chamber, meeting each ancient gaze in turn. All we're asking for is the same opportunity you had, the chance to learn from our mistakes and try again. The silver-marked council member spoke again. The galaxy is different now than it was during our expansion. It is more crowded, more dangerous. Other species have established territories, trade routes, spheres of influence. A fumbling young race could disrupt delicate balances, trigger conflicts. Or Kira countered. A young race with fresh perspectives could bring new solutions to old problems. Humans are good at thinking differently, at finding unconventional approaches. Maybe that's what the galaxy needs. Maya, who had been listening to the exchange with the intensity only children could muster, suddenly spoke up. Are you afraid of us? The question sent absolute silence through the chamber. Even the cosmic background hum seemed to pause. The idea that these ancient, powerful beings might fear humanity was so unexpected that no one seemed to know how to respond. Finally, Aeon Thul spoke, and his voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement. Explain your question, young human. Maya looked up at him with complete seriousness. You're all really old and really smart, but you're scared that we might do something bad if you let us try again. That sounds like being afraid. The council member with indigo skin made a sound that was definitely not amusement. We do not fear your species, child. We are concerned about the consequences of allowing an immature civilization to spread unchecked through the galaxy. But you can watch us, Maya said with the logic of childhood. Like when Mama watches me play to make sure I don't get hurt. You don't have to stop me from playing. You just make sure I'm safe. Kira stared at her daughter in amazement. In her simple words, Maya had outlined a solution that none of the adults had considered, guided development rather than prohibition. Jorik, who had been silent until now, spoke up. The child suggests a mentorship model rather than quarantine. It has precedent in Kethvar history. Ancient precedent. Another council member said dismissively, we have not guided a developing species in millennia. Perhaps because we have grown too cautious, Aeon Thul said thoughtfully. Too willing to observe from afar rather than engage directly. He looked at Kira with those deep, ancient eyes. Human, your offspring proposes that we guide rather than restrict your species' development. Are you prepared for the consequences of such guidance? Kira felt the weight of the moment. This was the chance she had hoped for, but it came with implications she was only beginning to understand. What would guidance involve? Observation, certainly. Intervention when necessary to prevent catastrophic mistakes. Gradual introduction to galactic civilization as your species demonstrates readiness. Aeon Thul paused, but also restrictions. Humans would not be free to expand without oversight. Your colonies would be monitored, your technology development guided. Some might see this as a form of benevolent imprisonment. The other council members were showing clear interest now. The silver-marked one spoke. It would require significant resources. Personnel to observe and guide. Technology to monitor human expansion. The commitment would span centuries, perhaps millennia. But, added another, it would also provide an unprecedented opportunity to study the development of a young, spacefaring species. The scientific value alone might justify the investment. Kira realized they were talking about humanity as if it were an interesting experiment, but she pushed down her irritation. This was better than quarantine. This was a chance. What guarantees would humanity have? She asked. How would we know this guidance wouldn't become permanent control? None, Aeon Thul said bluntly. Trust must be earned in both directions. Your species would need to prove worthy of eventual independence, and we would need to prove worthy of your trust. Maya tugged at Kira's hand again. Mama, they want to be our teachers? Something like that. Sweetheart. That's good. I like learning. The simplicity of her acceptance seemed to resonate through the chamber. Here was a human child, faced with the prospect of her entire species being placed under alien oversight, and she saw it as an opportunity to learn rather than a limitation on freedom. The child perspective is refreshing, the Indigo Council member admitted. Perhaps this is itself evidence of human adaptability, the ability to see opportunity where others might see restriction. The debate that followed was intense but brief. The council had clearly been hoping for some alternative to the stark choice between quarantine and unrestricted expansion. Maya's suggestion, refined through adult understanding, offered a third path. When the formal vote was taken, it was unanimous, though some members expressed more enthusiasm than others. The Council will implement a guided development program for humanity, Aeon Fel announced. Human colonies will be established under HFY observation and assistance. Human technology will be gradually enhanced with HFY knowledge. Human culture and values will be studied and, where appropriate, preserved and encouraged. Kira felt tears welling up, tears of relief, gratitude, and hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank us yet," Aeon Fel warned. "This path will not be easy for your species. Many humans will chafe under guidance, will resent restrictions, will demand immediate independence. Some may view this arrangement as a betrayal of human autonomy. Then, we'll deal with those challenges as they come," Kira said firmly. "Humans are good at adapting to difficult circumstances." "Indeed," the first speaker said, and for the first time, something that might have been a smile crossed his ancient features. "Your species' talent for endurance may serve you well in the trials ahead." As they prepared to leave the chamber, Maya looked back at the assembled council. "Thank you for being our teachers," she said with a small wave. "I'll try to be a good student." Several of the ancient beings actually returned the wave, their cosmic dignity momentarily set aside for a child's gesture of friendship. Outside the chamber, Jorik was waiting for them. "The council has made their decision," he said. "But now comes the harder task, implementing it. The other human survivors must be consulted and informed. Earth must be contacted to explain the new arrangement. Colony sites must be selected and prepared." "How long will all that take?" Kira asked. "Years, certainly. Decades, possibly. But time moves differently when you plan for millennia rather than decades." Kira thought about that as they returned to their quarters. Humanity was about to embark on a journey unlike anything in their history. Development under alien guidance, expansion under watchful eyes, growth within carefully constructed boundaries. It would test human nature in ways no one could predict. But they had a chance. Against all odds, speaking on behalf of their species, a mother and her child had convinced beings older than Earth itself to give humanity another try. The future was uncertain, but it was a future, and for now that was enough. Maya fell asleep that night, talking excitedly about all the things the blue teachers might show them. Her innocent enthusiasm was infectious, reminding Kira that every ending was also a beginning. The colony had failed, but from its ashes, something new was being born. A partnership between species, a chance for humanity to grow under guidance rather than perish in isolation. It wasn't the independence they had dreamed of, but it was survival with dignity, growth with support. And sometimes that was the best possible outcome. 5 years had passed since the council's decision, and Maya was no longer the frightened 3-year-old clinging to her mother in a dying shelter. At 8, she moved through the halls of New Harmony Station with the confident grace of someone born to space travel, switching effortlessly between English and the harmonic tones of HFY's speech as she played with both human and alien children. Kira watched her daughter from the observation deck of their family quarters, marveling at how much had changed. New Harmony was humanity's first truly successful interstellar settlement, a massive station that orbited a stable star, designed with both human needs and HFY technology. It housed nearly 10,000 humans now, survivors from various failed Earth colonies who had been gathered here to build something new under alien guidance. The past 5 years had not been easy. When news of the arrangement reached Earth, the reaction had been explosive. Half the population saw it as humanity's salvation, while the other half viewed it as a surrender of human independence to alien overlords. Protests, debates, and even some violence had erupted as humanity struggled to come to terms with their new status as a guided species. But here on New Harmony, practical concerns had overwhelmed philosophical ones. The station worked. The technology provided by the HFY had solved problems that had plagued human space travel for generations. Artificial gravity that didn't require rotation, atmosphere processors that could create breathable air from almost any source material, power systems that seemed to draw energy from the quantum foam itself. More importantly, The partnership was working. Human creativity, channeled through HFY wisdom, had produced innovations that surprised even their ancient teachers. Maya's generation was growing up bilingual in both language and technology, equally comfortable with human intuition and HFY logic. Mother Kira? The voice belonged to Zephyr, one of the HFY assigned to the station as both teacher and observer. Over the years, Kira had grown close to the young HFY, who had taken a particular interest in human child development. The Council has sent new instructions regarding the expansion project. Kira turned from the window, noting the tension in Zephyr's posture. The HFY were expressive once you learned to read their body language, and Zephyr was clearly troubled. What kind of instructions? They wished to accelerate the timeline for human independence trials. The first test colony is to be established within 2 years, with minimal HFY oversight. The news should have been cause for celebration. Humanity taking its first steps toward true self-governance in space. But something in Zephyr's tone suggested complications. That's good news, isn't it? Kira asked carefully. Perhaps. Or perhaps the Council has grown concerned about human development in ways they have not shared with us. Zephyr moved to the window beside her, his pale blue skin reflecting the starlight. There have been incidents. Kira's blood chilled. Over the past year, there had been growing tension between humans who embraced the guidance relationship and those who chafed under it. Some humans, particularly those who remembered the freedom of Earth's early space program, had begun to organize resistance movements. They called themselves the Independence Coalition, and their rhetoric had grown increasingly aggressive. What kind of incidents? 3 minor acts of sabotage on HFY vessels. An attempted hack of our communication systems. And yesterday, a group of coalition members tried to steal a courier ship to establish an unauthorized colony. Zephyr's large eyes met hers. The Council is beginning to question whether humans can be trusted with gradual independence, or whether more direct control is necessary. The implications hit Kira like a physical blow. Everything they had built over the past 5 years, the careful trust between species, the hope for humanity's future among the stars, all of it could be destroyed by a few extremists who couldn't accept that freedom had to be earned. How bad is it? She asked. Bad enough that Jorik has requested a private meeting with you. He believes human leaders need to address this situation before the Council loses patience entirely. Maya chose that moment to come racing into the quarters, her face flushed with excitement from playing with her friends. She skidded to a stop when she saw the serious expressions on the adults' faces. What's wrong? She asked, instantly picking up on the tension. Her young voice carried the slight harmonic undertones that came from growing up around HFY speech, marking her as part of the first truly bilingual generation. Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart, Kira said automatically, but Maya's expression suggested she wasn't buying it. Is it the angry humans again? Maya asked with the directness that had made her famous among both species. The ones who think the HFY are trying to control us. Kira and Zephyr exchanged a look. Maya's generation had grown up with full knowledge of the political tensions surrounding their situation. Trying to shelter them would have been both impossible and counterproductive. Yes, Kira admitted. Some humans are making it harder for everyone by fighting against the arrangement instead of working within it. Maya frowned, her young mind clearly working through the implications. But that's stupid. The HFY are helping us. They saved us when we were dying, and they're teaching us things we never could have learned by ourselves. Not everyone sees it that way, Zephyr said gently. Some believe that accepting help is the same as accepting weakness. But everyone needs help sometimes, Maya said with the simple wisdom that had first impressed the Council years before. Even grown-ups, even whole planets full of people. Zephyr made the sound that served as HFY laughter. If only the coalition members possessed half the wisdom of an 8-year-old human. That evening, Kira met with Jorik in his private chambers aboard the HFY section of the station. The years had been kind to him. He seemed more relaxed, more comfortable with human interaction than he had been during their first meeting. But now his usual calm was replaced by obvious concern. "The situation is deteriorating," he said without preamble. The Council received a formal protest from Earth's government yesterday, demanding immediate termination of the guidance agreement and full human autonomy in space. Kira felt sick. They can't be serious. Humanity isn't ready for full independence yet. We still have so much to learn. I agree, but I'm not the one who needs convincing. Aeon Thul and the others are beginning to question whether humans are capable of the patience required for gradual development. The Coalition's actions have given ammunition to those who always believed your species was too volatile for galactic citizenship. What would it take to change their minds? Jorik was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Evidence that humans can police themselves. That your species is capable of internal restraint and wisdom, not just external compliance with our guidance. An idea began to form in Kira's mind. Dangerous, potentially disastrous, but possibly the only way to prove humanity's maturity to their alien observers. "What if we gave them what they want?" she said slowly. "You mean grant full independence?" "Kira, that would be catastrophic. Humans would almost certainly repeat the mistakes that killed the first colony, and this time there might not be rescue available. Not full independence. But what if we established the test colony without Kethvar oversight? What if humans had to sink or swim entirely on their own, but with the knowledge and technology they've gained over the past 5 years?" Jorik stared at her. "You're suggesting we deliberately remove our safety net?" "I'm suggesting we prove that the safety net is no longer necessary, at least for one small colony." Kira's mind was racing now, seeing the possibilities. Pick the most qualified humans, the ones who have learned the most from Kethvar teaching. Give them a chance to show that they can succeed without constant guidance. And if they fail, then humanity accepts continued guidance without complaint. But if they succeed, if they can establish and maintain a colony without Kethvar intervention, then the Council will have proof that humans can be trusted with greater independence. The risk was enormous. A second catastrophic failure would almost certainly end any chance of human expansion into space for generations. But continued resistance from Earth and the Coalition might achieve the same result anyway. "I would need to present this to the Council," Jorik said finally. "They would want guarantees, conditions, specific parameters for success or failure. Then let's give them those things. Let's design a test that proves humanity is ready for the next step." Over the following weeks, Kira found herself at the center of intense negotiations between human leaders, Kethvar observers, and the distant Council. The test colony proposal evolved into something far more complex than her original idea. 3 separate colonies would be established simultaneously, one with full Kethvar oversight as a control group, one with minimal guidance, and one with no alien intervention at all. The comparison would provide data on human performance under different levels of independence. More controversially, the fully independent colony would be staffed entirely by volunteers, humans who understood they would receive no rescue if things went wrong. It was a gamble with human lives, but one that might determine the future of their entire species among the stars. Maya, despite her young age, grasped the implications immediately when Kira explained the proposal. "So some humans are going to try to build a new home with no help at all?" she asked. "That's right. To prove that we've learned enough to do it safely. What if they can't? What if they make mistakes like the first colony did?" Kira took a deep breath. "Then they might die, and humanity might not get another chance to expand into space." Maya was quiet for a long time, her young face serious as she processed this information. Finally, she looked up at her mother with determined eyes. "Then they'll need the best people. The smartest ones. The ones who learned the most from the Kethvar." She paused. "They'll need people like you, won't they, Mama?" The question hit Kira like a physical blow because she had been thinking the same thing. Her experience with the original colony disaster, her relationship with the Kethvar, her understanding of both human nature and alien technology, all of it made her one of the most qualified candidates for the independence test. But it also meant potentially leaving behind everything they had built on New Harmony. It meant risking not just her own life, but Maya's future. I don't know yet, sweetheart. We'll have to see what happens. But even as she spoke the words, Kira knew she was already committed. When the call came for volunteers to staff humanity's first truly independent interstellar colony, she would answer it. Because sometimes the only way to prove you were ready for freedom was to risk everything for the chance to claim it. The next phase of humanity's interstellar journey was about to begin, and this time there would be no safety net. Only the knowledge, skills, and determination that 5 years of alien guidance had provided. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. The world they chose was nothing like Kepler 442b. Kira stood on the observation deck of the colony ship's Second Chance, watching as Haven 4 grew larger in the view screen. The planet was smaller than Earth, with longer days and a stable, warm climate. More importantly, it showed no signs of the extreme seasonal variations that had doomed the first colony. The Kethvar had been generous in their planet selection, giving humanity every possible advantage for this crucial test. 300 volunteers had signed up for the independence trial, knowing full well that no rescue would come if they failed. They were the best and brightest of New Harmony's residents, engineers who had mastered hybrid human Kethvar technology, xenobiologists who understood alien ecosystems, leaders who had learned to balance human ambition with practical wisdom. Maya, now 9, pressed her face against the observation window beside her mother. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Do you think we'll be able to make it our home?" "I hope so, sweetheart," Kira replied, though her own doubts were growing stronger as the moment of truth approached. "We've prepared as much as we can." Behind them, other colonists moved through the ship's corridors with the purposeful energy of people approaching their destiny. Some showed the easy confidence of youth, convinced that their training and technology would see them through any challenge. Others, particularly those old enough to remember the first colony's failure, displayed the careful optimism of people who had learned that hope was precious but fragile. The ship's intercom crackled to life. "This is Captain Morrison. We'll be entering orbit in 30 minutes. All department heads report to the bridge for final landing site confirmation." Kira had been elected colonial coordinator by her fellow volunteers, a position that made her responsible for the overall success or failure of their venture. It was a burden she had accepted reluctantly, knowing that her experience with both human desperation and Kethvar wisdom made her uniquely qualified for the role. As she made her way to the bridge, Kira passed the ship's communication array. For the past 2 weeks, it had been silent except for routine navigation updates. Once they landed, all communication with the Kethvar would cease. They would be truly on their own, with only their own skills and judgment to guide them. The bridge buzzed with activity as department heads gathered around the central holographic display. Haven 4 hung before them in perfect detail, its continents mapped and analyzed by months of orbital surveys. 3 potential landing sites had been identified, each with different advantages and challenges. Site Alpha offers the most abundant freshwater sources, reported Dr. Sarah Chun, the expedition's chief geologist. But the terrain is more rugged, which could complicate construction. Site Beta has excellent soil composition for agriculture, added Marcus Webb, their agricultural specialist. The downside is that it's further from mineral deposits we'll need for manufacturing. Site Gamma splits the difference, concluded Captain Morrison. Moderate advantages in all categories, no major disadvantages. It's the safe choice. Kira studied the display, remembering the lessons learned from the first colony's disaster. Safe was appealing, but it might not be optimal for long-term growth. The original colony had chosen the safest possible site and still failed when unexpected challenges arose. "What do you think, Coordinator?" Morrison asked. Before Kira could answer, Maya's voice came from behind them. "What about this place?" The 9-year-old had followed her mother to the bridge and was pointing at a location not marked as a potential site, a coastal area where a major river system met the ocean. Dr. Chun frowned at the display. That region wasn't considered because of the tidal variations. The coastal flooding could be problematic. But Maya said with the directness that had become her trademark, if the water level changes regularly, it means the soil will be really good for growing things. And being near both river and ocean means lots of different kinds of water for drinking and making things. The adults exchanged glances. Maya's observation was technically correct, but it also highlighted additional risks. Coastal settlements were vulnerable to storms, flooding, and other oceanic hazards. It's a more aggressive choice, Captain Morrison said carefully. Higher potential rewards, but also higher risks. Kira looked at her daughter's earnest face, then at the display showing the coastal region Maya had identified. The site did offer significant advantages: abundant freshwater, rich soil, access to multiple ecosystems. It would also test the colonists' ability to adapt and manage environmental challenges. The Kethvar wouldn't have given us a death trap, she said finally. If the planet is suitable for human habitation, then we should be able to handle coastal settlement. And Maya's right about the advantages. So we're choosing the site with the most variables? Dr. Chen asked. We're choosing the site with the most opportunities, Kira corrected. This colony succeeds or fails based on our ability to adapt and innovate. Playing it safe didn't work for the first colony when unexpected challenges arose. The decision was made. Within hours, the second chance began its descent toward the coastal region Maya had identified. As they broke through the atmosphere, Kira felt the familiar mixture of terror and exhilaration that came with making irreversible choices. The landing was smooth, guided by Kethvar design systems that had proven reliable over 5 years of use. As the ship's massive engines fell silent and the landing ramp extended, 300 humans prepared to step onto an alien world with no guarantee that they would ever leave it alive. Kira was among the first to emerge, Maya holding her hand as they walked down the ramp together. The air was warm and humid, carrying scents of unfamiliar vegetation and the salt tang of the nearby ocean. Overhead, a sun slightly larger than Earth's beat down from a sky tinged with subtle green. It smells different, Maya observed, wrinkling her nose. But not bad. Just alien. Everything here will be alien, Kira reminded her. That's what makes it an adventure. The first weeks were a whirlwind of construction and exploration. The colonists worked with the efficiency of people who knew their survival depended on getting the basics right. Temporary shelters gave way to permanent structures. Power systems came online. Water purification plants began processing both river and seawater. But the real test came when the first storm season arrived. The coastal storms of Haven 4 were unlike anything in the colonists' experience. Massive weather systems rolled in from the ocean with winds that exceeded 200 kilometers per hour. Rain fell in sheets so dense it was like standing under a waterfall. The river levels rose dramatically, threatening to flood the carefully planned settlement. Emergency protocols are in effect, Kira announced over the colony's communication system as the worst storm in recorded planetary history approached their location. All non-essential personnel to storm shelters immediately. Engineering teams prepare for emergency power and water management. Maya, safe in the underground shelter with the other children, looked up at her mother with worried eyes. Is this like what happened to the first colony? No, sweetheart, Kira said, though she wasn't entirely certain. This is a different kind of challenge. We prepared for this. Had they, though? The storm was stronger than their models had predicted, and the flooding was more extensive than their coastal management systems had been designed to handle. As water began seeping into some of the lower structures, Kira found herself facing the same helpless feeling she had experienced years ago in the freezing shelter. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had 300 people with 5 years of advanced training and hybrid technology working together to solve the problem. Coordinator came Dr. Chen's voice over the emergency channel. We need to redirect the river flow to prevent catastrophic flooding. but it will require manual intervention at the primary control station during the storm. The control station was located at the point where their river management system met the ocean, directly in the path of the storm's worst fury. Reaching it would be dangerous, possibly fatal. "I'll go," Kira said immediately. "No," Maya's voice came from behind her. "We'll go." Kira turned to stare at her daughter in shock. "Absolutely not. You're 9 years old, Maya. This is dangerous work for trained adults. I'm small enough to get through spaces adults can't," Maya said with calm logic that reminded Kira painfully of the child who had once convinced a council of ancient aliens to give humanity another chance. "And I know the control systems as well as anyone. I've been studying them since we landed." The argument that followed was brief, but intense. Maya's proposal was logical, but terrifying. She could indeed access control systems that larger adults might struggle with, and her knowledge was surprisingly comprehensive. But sending a child into a deadly storm violated every parental instinct Kira possessed. In the end, it was the other colonists who made the decision. "She's right," said Captain Morrison. "We need someone small and agile to reach the manual controls. And, frankly, Maya knows those systems better than most of our adults." "I'll go with her," Dr. Chen added. "We'll keep her safe." "No," Maya said firmly. "Too many people will just get in the way. I can do this, Mama. You taught me that sometimes humans have to take risks to prove they're ready for freedom." The words hit Kira like a physical blow because they were her own, spoken to justify the entire independence trial. How could she deny her daughter the chance to live by the principles she had taught her? The journey to the control station was a nightmare of wind, rain, and flooding. Maya, wearing a specialized environmental suit designed for her small frame, moved through the storm with the determination of someone far older than her years. Kira followed at a distance, ready to intervene if necessary, but Maya needed no help. The control station itself was partially flooded and buffeted by winds that would have knocked an adult off their feet. But Maya's small size was indeed an advantage. She could duck under debris, slip through gaps in the twisted infrastructure, and reach manual controls that larger hands couldn't manipulate. River flow redirected. Her voice came through the communication system, barely audible over the storm's fury. Flooding should decrease within the hour. She was right. As the river's flow was diverted away from the colony's core structures, the water levels began to drop. The storm still raged, but the immediate crisis had passed. When Maya emerged from the control station, soaked and exhausted but triumphant, the entire colony was waiting to welcome her home. Not as a child who had been allowed to help, but as a full member of the community who had proven her worth under pressure. "I'm proud of you," Kira said, pulling her daughter into a fierce hug. "You saved the colony. We all saved the colony," Maya corrected with the wisdom of her generation. "That's how humans work. Together." The storm passed, and Haven Colony not only survived but thrived. The crisis had tested every system they had built and proven that human engineering, enhanced by Kethvar knowledge, but guided by human judgment, could handle unexpected challenges. More importantly, it had proven that humanity's next generation was ready for responsibilities their parents had never imagined. Maya and the other children who had grown up under alien guidance possessed a combination of human creativity and cosmic perspective that made them uniquely suited for interstellar citizenship. 2 years later, when the Second Chance launched a communication beacon back toward Kethvar space with news of the colony's success, the message was simple: Haven Colony thrives. Humanity is ready for the next phase. The response, when it came months later, was equally brief. The Council concurs. Independence protocols will be implemented across all human settlements. Well done. Kira stood in the same observation deck where she had first seen Haven 4. Now watching as her daughter played with friends, both human and newly arrived Kethvar, young members of both species who would grow up as equals rather than student and teacher. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Maya asked, joining her mother at the window. At 11, she was already showing signs of becoming a leader in her own right, someone who could bridge the gap between human ambition and cosmic wisdom. "I think we did what we had to do," Kira replied. "We proved that humans can learn, can grow, can become worthy partners in a galaxy full of wonders." "And what comes next?" Kira smiled, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed cold and distant but warm and welcoming. "Next, we explore. We build. We become the spacefaring species we always dreamed of being. But this time we do it with the wisdom to know we don't have to do it alone." Outside, Haven IV's twin moons rose over a thriving human settlement that had proven, once and for all, that humanity belonged among the stars. The long journey from a freezing colonial shelter to true galactic citizenship was complete. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility and partnership, guided by the hard-learned truth that strength came not from independence alone, but from the wisdom to accept help, learn from others, and grow beyond your limitations. Humanity had finally come home to the galaxy, and the galaxy had welcomed them with open arms. Maya was right. Humans worked best when they worked together. And now, they were working together with allies among the stars. The ice crystals formed patterns on Kira's breath as she pulled her daughter closer, feeling the tiny body shivering against her chest. 3-year-old Maya had stopped crying hours ago, which terrified Kira more than the screaming had. The silence meant her child was giving up, surrendering to the cold that had claimed so many others in the colony. The emergency shelter's heating system had failed 16 hours ago. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen wasteland of Kepler 442b, a planet that had once seemed like humanity's second chance. Now it felt like their grave. The temperature readings on her wrist display showed -47 degrees Celsius and dropping. Even with the insulated walls of the shelter, death crept closer with each passing hour. Kira remembered when they first arrived on this world 2 years ago. The colonization ship New Dawn had carried 15,000 souls across the void, seeking a fresh start after Earth's climate had finally collapsed beyond repair. Kepler 442b had seemed perfect in the initial surveys, slightly larger than Earth, with a stable star and promising atmospheric readings. The first settlements had thrived during the planet's warmer season, but they hadn't understood the planet's true nature. They hadn't realized that Kepler 442b's orbit was more elliptical than their model suggested, creating extreme seasonal variations that lasted decades. What they thought was the normal climate was actually the planetary summer. Winter had come 6 months ago, and with it, temperatures that no human settlement could withstand. The main colony had fallen first. Kira had watched the communication feeds go dark one by one as power systems failed and people froze in their homes. The outlying settlements tried to hold on, consolidating survivors in central heated areas, but the cold was relentless. It seemed to seep through every barrier humanity could construct. Maya stirred weakly in her arms, and Kira felt tears freeze on her cheeks. She had tried everything, burning furniture for warmth, layering every piece of clothing they owned, even sharing body heat with the other survivors. But one by one, they had succumbed. The Hendersons died 3 days ago. Old Mr. Chun passed yesterday. This morning, she had found Mrs. Albright frozen solid in her bunk. Now it was just Kira and Maya in the shelter that had once housed 20 families. She looked at her daughter's pale face, the lips tinged with blue despite the layers of blankets wrapped around her small form. Maya's breathing was shallow and irregular. Kira knew the signs. She had seen them in the others before they died. Hypothermia was claiming her baby, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The rational part of her mind told her to accept it, to make peace with their fate. The heating fuel had run out completely. The emergency beacon had been transmitting for days with no response. Even if rescue came, it would be too late. They had perhaps hours left before the cold claimed them both. But she couldn't give up. Not while Maya still breathed. Not while there was even the smallest chance. Kira stood on unsteady legs, her muscles stiff from the cold, and carried Maya to the shelter's small window. Outside, the alien landscape stretched endlessly, rolling hills of ice and snow under a pale, distant sun that provided no warmth. The sky was a deep purple-black, and strange aurora danced overhead, beautiful and terrible. This world had killed them. Humanity had reached across the stars only to die slowly in the cold. She pressed her face against the frosted glass, searching for any sign of hope. Movement, light, anything that might suggest rescue was coming. But there was only the endless white expanse and the howling wind. A memory surfaced from her childhood on Earth. Her grandmother telling her stories of the old frontier when humans first crossed oceans and continents to find new lands. How many had died in those journeys? How many had frozen in mountain passes or starved in empty plains? Yet humanity had persisted, driven by something deeper than logic or comfort. The same spirit that had brought them to the stars would not let her give up now. Kira returned to their makeshift bed, mattresses, and blankets piled together for maximum insulation. She lay down with Maya cradled against her, sharing what little body heat remained between them. The shelter groaned around them as the wind battered its walls, but it held. Human engineering, even when failing, was stubborn. She began to sing softly to Maya, an old lullaby her own mother had sung to her. Her voice was hoarse from the cold, but the words still came. Maya's eyes fluttered open, such beautiful brown eyes, like her father's. Thomas had died in the first wave of the freeze, trying to repair the colony's main generator. He had always been the brave one, the one who believed humanity could overcome any obstacle. "Daddy's watching over us," Kira whispered to Maya. "He's going to keep us safe." Maya's small hand emerged from the blankets and touched Kira's face. Her fingers were ice cold, but her grip was firm. She was fighting too, in her own small way. The hours passed slowly. Kira dozed fitfully, waking periodically to check on Maya's breathing. Each time, she feared she would find her daughter still and cold, but Maya's heart kept beating. Weak, but persistent like humanity itself. She remembered reading about the first Mars colonies, how they had faced similar challenges. Equipment failures, environmental hazards, the constant threat of death in an alien world. Many had died, but enough had survived to establish humanity's first foothold beyond Earth. Those colonists had become legends, their names remembered centuries later. Perhaps that was humanity's true strength. Not the ability to avoid death, but the refusal to surrender to it. Even when hope seemed impossible, humans found ways to endure. The wind outside grew stronger, shaking the shelter's framework. Kira pulled the blankets tighter around them both, creating a small cocoon of shared warmth. This might be their last night, but they would face it together. If they died, it would be with dignity, holding on to love even in the face of an indifferent universe. She thought about the messages they had sent to Earth before the communication array failed. Reports of their situation, requests for help that would take years to reach home, and years more for any response to return. The people of Earth might never know what had happened to the New Dawn colony, but they had tried. They had pushed the boundaries of human knowledge and capability, even if they had failed. That had to count for something. Maya's breathing grew shallower. Kira held her closer, feeling her daughter's heart beating against her chest. Such a small, brave heart. Maya had never complained about the cold, never cried for things she couldn't have. She seemed to understand, in a way children sometimes do, that they were facing something beyond anyone's control. "I love you, baby girl," Kira whispered. "Mommy loves you so much." The shelter's lights flickered as the emergency power finally began to fail. Soon they would be in complete darkness, with only the alien aurora outside to light their final hours. But Kira was not afraid. She had done everything she could. She had protected her daughter as long as possible, loved her until the very end. That was what mothers did. That was what humans did. As consciousness began to slip away, Kira thought she heard something, a sound different from the wind. Deeper, more rhythmic. Like engines. But that was impossible. No rescue was coming. Her mind was playing tricks as the hypothermia advanced. She closed her eyes and held Maya close, feeling her daughter's warmth against her heart. If this was the end, at least they would face it together. At least Maya would not die alone. The sound grew louder, but Kira was already drifting away. The cold was winning, but it had not defeated them. Even in death, they would remain unbroken. That was the human way. Outside, something moved in the darkness. Lights appeared in the sky. Not the natural aurora, but something else. Something purposeful. The sound of engines became unmistakable, growing closer with each passing moment. But Kira could not hear it anymore. She had slipped into the final sleep, her arms still wrapped protectively around her daughter. They lay together in the dying shelter, two small figures against the vast cold of an alien world. The lights in the sky grew brighter, descending through the storm toward the surface. Whatever was coming, it would arrive soon. But for Kira and Maya, time had run out. The cold had claimed them, as it had claimed so many others. Or so it seemed. Deep in her unconscious state, Kira still fought. Her mother's heart refused to stop beating, refused to let go of the child in her arms. Even as her body temperature dropped to dangerous levels, some primitive part of her mind held on. Humans were stubborn creatures, capable of surviving in conditions that should have killed them. The lights grew closer, and with them came hope. But hope was a dangerous thing on a world like this. It could keep you alive long enough to suffer more, or it could be the spark that ignited impossible survival. In the darkness of the shelter, two hearts continued to beat. Faint, irregular, but persistent. The human spirit, refusing to surrender even when logic demanded it. The storm began to clear as the lights descended, revealing shapes in the sky that defied easy explanation. They were not human ships. The design was too strange, the technology too advanced. But they were clearly artificial, clearly controlled by intelligence. The question was, whose intelligence? And what did they want with the dying remnants of humanity's first interstellar colony? Kira would not learn the answer for some time. She floated in a place between life and death, holding her daughter in arms that had grown too weak to feel. But even in that liminal state, she remained a mother. She remained human, and that perhaps was about to make all the difference. The lights touched down nearby, sending vibrations through the frozen ground. The shelter shook slightly, disturbed by forces beyond the wind. Whatever had arrived was large, powerful, and very close. In the silence that followed, broken only by the whisper of alien wind across ice, change came to Kepler, 442b. The long night of human suffering was about to give way to something new, something that would test the very definitions of strength, compassion, and what it meant to be human in a universe full of wonders and terrors. But for now, Kira and Maya slept the sleep of the nearly dead, unaware that their story was just beginning.